Welcome. In this video, we'll explain why the FL Studio CPU meter is the one you should focus on when analyzing your project's CPU load. A recurring frustration we see on our customer forums is, why does the FL Studio CPU meter differ from the CPU utilization shown in the operating system's CPU meter? Spoiler, they measure completely different things. Let's break it down step by step. The Windows Task Manager and macOS Activity Monitor display system-wide CPU usage as the CPU reports it. Take my setup for example, a 12-core CPU with 24 threads. Each core has two independent processing units that can work simultaneously. Now, as you can see, most of my cores are showing no activity. They're parked. They're idle as Windows has powered them down, probably to keep Long Beach from transforming into Atlantis 2.0. Keep in mind, the operating system CPU meter reflects activity across your entire system, while FL Studio CPU meter focuses solely on what the application is using. Although the Task Manager can show app-specific CPU activity, it doesn't break down usage per core. The Task Manager reports system-wide CPU utilization as a percentage. That makes sense. Out of 24 threads, 20 aren't doing anything, and only these 4 are active. But here's where things get interesting. Even if one thread is running at 100% load while the others are dormant, Task Manager will only show a 4.16% load. Since it's reporting the fraction of the total CPU being used, this is a measure of capacity, percentage of total cores and threads used. Notice this doesn't tell you whether the CPU can do a specific audio task faster, it just tells you how busy the system thinks the CPU is. For real-time applications like audio processing though, this way of looking at things isn't very helpful. If any one of the CPU threads the audio is running on gets maxed out at 100%, any task relying on that CPU thread, which is often the case with audio applications, will have to wait for it to finish before the audio it's generating can be used on other CPU threads. That's when you start getting audio issues like crackles, pops, and of course FL Studio hitting 100% usage. We call these glitches buffer underruns or just underruns. It's common for users experiencing this to feel frustrated and claim FL Studio isn't using their CPU fully before they get underruns, and we suck at DAWing. But there's more to this problem. Let's take a closer look at why underruns happen. Take a moment to consider the audio setting buffer length. When you play a project in FL Studio, the live audio you hear is rendered ahead of time, in small segments that are sent to your audio interface, so that's a buffer after it's generated. So in this case, you're listening to audio from 3 milliseconds in the past. This pre-rendering is done to allow smooth audio playback despite any short spikes in CPU load when your computer can't keep up with real time. But as we'll see, sometimes that's unavoidable. The FL Studio CPU meter then shows the percentage of the buffer length required to fill each audio buffer, compared to the full buffer length. So it measures the real-world time it takes your computer to render one full audio buffer and divides it by the buffer length, or the time it takes to play a whole audio buffer. For example, 20% means FL Studio created the audio for the buffer in 20% of the buffer length. 90% means FL Studio required 90% of the buffer length to fill it with audio, very close to running out of time to fill it. Once FL Studio needs a longer time than is available to fill the buffer, 100%, there will be gaps in the audio, as the buffer is pulled to the sound card before it's filled, and so has tiny bits of silence in it, heard as glitches or stuttering. So remember, the operating system CPU meter was showing the percentage of the CPU in use across all threads. This is different. FL Studio is measuring how much time is needed to fill the buffer. Cores and threads in use versus time to fill a buffer are completely different metrics. But let's see this in action. This example highlights the difference between serial and parallel processing in FL Studio. only instruments and associated effects routed in parallel can actually be processed simultaneously. Serial effects chains rely on the previous effect or instrument, meaning they have to be processed one step at a time, a constraint tied to this reality's unfortunate circumstance that is linear time. In highly serial scenarios with long effects chains, your fancy high-tech multi-core CPU is therefore limited by the single-core performance of its slowest core. You are the weakest link. Goodbye. However, separate effects chains on independent tracks can be processed simultaneously on different CPU threads, speeding things up significantly. The key is routing. Using fewer bus and send mixer tracks improves performance and so aligns the FL Studio CPU meter more closely with Task Manager or Activity Monitor. If you're unsure why a project is performing badly in FL Studio, check out the plugin Performance Monitor and sort by either the total or peak metrics. Then try to simplify that instrument or effect by rendering it out to audio and deleting it from the project, or removing some complexity in the effects chain by removing effects that aren't really necessary. Remember, the OS handles thread assignment to cores, so FL Studio can only publish threads and the rest is up to the operating system. The less serial you're routing, the more threads the OS can process, which is why the FL Studio meter is the one to trust. Don't forget to check the video description for a link to the projects made for this video so you can test this out at home. Happy music making!